Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Lepakshi Khurana. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you on Wednesday, the 16th of December. Pakistan observes first anniversary of Peshawar school attack. Clashes erupt between Madhesis and Nepal police in Janakpur, dozens injured. And Sundar Pichai pushes Google projects to bring technology empowerment in India. And now for all the details. Pakistan on Wednesday marked the first anniversary of the Army Public School massacre in Peshawar. 141 people, mostly students, were killed in one of the most brutal militant attacks in Pakistan.
Pakistan paid rich tributes to those who lost their lives in the militant attack in a somber ceremony at the school. The country's top civil and military figures, including Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and Army Chief General Raheel Sharif, were among those attending the function. 134 students and other staff members died when a group of Taliban militants indiscriminately opened fire inside the school in an incident that not only shook Pakistan but the entire world. Rallies and demonstrations were also held in different parts of the country on the eve of the anniversary.
आज इसलिए इधर खड़े हैं ताकि हम दहशतगर्दों को बता सकें कि हम उनसे ज़्यादा ताकतवर हैं, हम उनको उनके इस इरादे के बाद किसी और इरादे को नहीं होने देंगे.
Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is said to have approved renaming of 122 schools and colleges of Islamabad after the names of the Peshawar attack victims. On December 2nd, Pakistan hanged 4 men tried in secret military courts for their involvement in the massacre.
As Pakistan observes the first anniversary of the dreaded Peshawar school attack, Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai urged Pakistan to use education to fight terrorism. A terror victim herself, Yousafzai said the country needs to educate its future generation in order to fight the ideology of extremism and terrorism.
Nobel Prize-winning teenager Malala Yousafzai has said educating the young generation in Pakistan is vital to fight extremism and stop similar incidents in future. She said this after meeting some of the survivors of the massacre in Birmingham, England. She listened to Muhammad Ibrahim Khan, a 14-year-old at that time, describe how gunmen wearing suicide vests burst into his school and began to shoot indiscriminately.
So, well, I went through a horrible incident in my life where I myself was shot, but I never cried. And this was the day that really made me to cry because the stories of all the mothers and the children were tragic. And you just imagine for a second that what was the crime of these children.
At least 500 students aged between 10 and 20 years were inside the building when the attack started. At least 3 of the militants blew themselves up, resulting in several charred bodies of bombers and victims. It was only after 8 hours of the assault that the army declared the operation to flush the militants out was over and that all 9 insurgents had been killed. The school killings shook the government to take serious measures to tackle the Islamist insurgency.
So Pakistan did change in a way that the political leaders, they came together, they united. But what they forgot was the education of the future generation. They did agree on military actions, but none of them mentioned that now we need to educate our future generation in order to fight this ideology of extremism and terrorism and this hatred.
141 people, including 134 children, were killed in the 2014 massacre inside the army school in one of the worst assaults in Pakistan's recent history.
Moving on, Saudi Arabia's inclusion of Pakistan in a 34-nation military alliance against terrorism has sparked confusion. Islamabad said that it was unaware of such development and Pakistan officials are seeking clarity on the matter from Riyadh.
After Saudi Arabia named Pakistan as part of the multilateral military alliance, Pakistan officials said Islamabad was not consulted before Riyadh made the announcement. In a surprise move, the Saudi government on Tuesday announced a military alliance of Muslim countries, including Pakistan, for coordinating and supporting military operations against terrorism in Iraq, Syria, Libya, Egypt and Afghanistan. Pakistani authorities are gathering details on the alliance before taking a stand on it. This is not the first time that Saudi Arabia has named Pakistan as part of its military alliance without Islamabad's knowledge and consent. The Saudis earlier this year named Pakistan as part of the coalition that carried out operations against Houthi rebels in Yemen. Pakistan later declined to join the Yemen conflict. The authorities had then clarified that Pakistani government maintains a policy to not deploy its troops outside the country's borders except for UN peacekeeping missions. Pakistan's reluctance to become part of the Saudi-led alliance is attributed to both domestic and regional compulsions, as the new Saudi alliance potentially can put Pakistan at odds with Iran as well as Russia.
Moving on to news from India, Google CEO Sundar Pichai, who is on a visit to India, underlined the search giant's intention to push for more internet adoption in the country on Wednesday. He talked about the company's plan for India.
During his first visit to his native country as Google CEO, Sundar Pichai announced a number of initiatives that Google says will help more Indians connect to the web. He informed that the company has been working to provide free Wi-Fi in 100 railway stations in India, as promised to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his visit to Silicon Valley earlier this year.
Getting people connected is a foundational goal. This is why just a few months ago, we announced the largest public Wi-Fi project in the world. We are partnering with RailTel and Indian Railways to bring connectivity to over 400 railway stations across India. This will cover 10 million passengers every day. We are on track to get 100 stations online by the end of the year, by end of 2016. And as I speak, the team is setting up infrastructure in Mumbai Central and testing it out right now. We expect it to go live in January.
Pichai also spoke about expanding the reach of internet across the country, especially in rural areas, as well as popularizing web services among women.
In addition, we are working on Project Loon. Project Loon is our initiative to get balloons up in the sky so that you can provide internet to hard-to-reach rural areas. We think it could make a lot of sense to reach rural areas in India, and we are exploring ways to bring our service to India.
Google's rural internet program will move from pilot to full-scale program in 300,000 villages in India. Pichai will have talks and discussions with prominent industry leaders and the government. These include discussions with Communications and IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad to further discuss the PM's Digital India initiative, Infosys co-founder Narayan Murthy and Wipro chairman Azim Premji, amongst others.
Meanwhile, in Nepal, supporters of the United Democratic Madhesi Front clashed with police in various places of Janakpur city on Wednesday during President Bidya Devi Bhandari's visit to the holy town. Nepal President Bidya Devi Bhandari was on a brief visit to the Janaki temple for a special ceremony. Over 40 people, including Indian tourists, have sustained injuries in the clashes and are undergoing treatment at local health facilities. The Madhesi community has been protesting for months against the newly adopted constitution, which was implemented in September this year. The minority community claims that the 7-province model of the new charter discriminates against them and is demanding redrawing of boundaries. Moving on to news from Myanmar, opium production in Myanmar posed a daunting challenge for Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party, which is set to take power in February next year. Myanmar produced an estimated 647 tons of opium in 2015, second only to Afghanistan, a UN report states.
A new report published by United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, or UNODC, has stated that opium production remains a grave concern in Myanmar despite being stabilized for a third year. The country is not only a major producer of opium and its derivative heroin, but also narcotics and a highly addictive drug named methamphetamine. The $1 billion illegal drug industry is majorly booming in border areas and conflicted areas controlled by ethnic rebel armies or by the Myanmar military and allied militias. Poverty has also driven many farmers to the illicit production.
But you'll notice it's particularly highlighted in North Shan, which coincidentally is where you see the increase that we are reporting, the 14% increase. So there's an interesting correlation between conflict in that area and production.
He also called for scaling up UNODC projects in Myanmar to provide opium farmers with alternative sources of income, such as coffee.
In the scale of the challenge that I've presented, and the fact that part of the north of the country is essentially a drug economy, she has a big task in front of her. And it's not something which is going to be fixed in a day.
Myanmar recently emerged from decades of military rule, and many in the country are pinning hopes on the newly elected National League of Democracy led by Aung San Suu Kyi to eradicate such social menace and bring progress and development.
India on Wednesday marked the 3rd anniversary of Nirbhaya gang rape case, which led to a public outcry and forced the centre to formulate a new anti-rape law.
2 weeks after the incredibly violent gang rape, the 23-year-old victim died of her injuries in a Singapore hospital. The brutality of the crime jolted the nation's collective consciousness, triggering angry street protests. Since then, new and tougher anti-rape laws have been introduced, but whether the new measures have made the city any safer is still subject to debate. Activists say nothing less than a zero-tolerance approach to crime against women will be an effective deterrent.
This kind of cases can only stop, by very, very serious police intervention. Absolute message of zero tolerance and serious and quick conviction to such people. You put them behind the bar, you do serious procedure in the court, then I think it is not going to be repeated.
Many say the problem is deeper and will not be solved with stricter policing and punishments alone, but by sensitizing people and educating women about their rights.
It's not only important to encourage women to be empowered, it's important for even men to learn that they have to support the women. Without their support, we cannot do much. After all, if half of us are held back, we cannot progress.
The brutal gang rape led to demonstrations by thousands of people in 2012 that jolted many in the country and forced the government to enact stiffer penalties on gender crimes. Since then, a spike in media reports, government campaigns and civil society programs have increased public awareness of women's rights and emboldened victims to register abuses. Although India has put stiffer laws in place, but their proper implementation remains a prime concern for the country.
Well, that's the way it was in South Asia this evening. Before we conclude, the top stories once again. Pakistan observes first anniversary of Peshawar school attack. Clashes erupt between Madhesis and Nepal police in Janakpur, dozens injured. And Sundar Pichai pushes Google projects to bring technology empowerment in India. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/SAsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @SAsiaNewsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Good night.